Vai começar agora.
Sim, consigo. Certo. Tá bom. Ok. E como eu tô pelo celular, às vezes vai só dar uma vou ter que virar, viu?
Estou por aqui, Mônica. Estou te ouvindo. Estou.
Judy, are you in the English channel? Can you ask her? We are in the English channel. We're still there, right? Yes. Judy, no one is talking actually, so maybe it's also this is the problem.
Okay.
Shall we start?
Well, I'm with you on that. I agree with you on it. Absolutely.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this second day of MES and to this virtual panel titled Artivism to Promote a South-to-South Dialogue. This is kind of a challenging session because we have participants or panelists from Brazil and Kenya was on a power cut until like 10 minutes ago. So we are so happy that Judy and Azi were able to join us. And we have also translation in Portuguese. So bear with us in case of any technical difficulties, because what can possibly go wrong, right? So I'd like to start this session with a land acknowledgement. So Simon Fraser University respectfully and with gratitude acknowledges that we work on the shared and ceded traditional Coast Salish lands of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Coquitlam nations. We acknowledge the sovereignty and equality of indigenous nations and are guided by aspirations to remake Canada into a decolonial state comprised of indigenous and non-indigenous people who function with respect for one another. This panel that is the co-chair, let's say, with Andrea Medrado there on the top of the screen, brings together academics and artivists to reflect on the topic of artivism and how artivism can support a global South dialogue to promote global social justice And it's also the occasion for us to give you a preview of a book that we wrote and will be out soon, called Media Activism, Artivism, and the Fight Against Marginalization in the Global South. So the session is going to be structured like that. In the first 15 minutes or so, Andrea will introduce the project and the output of the projects that led to this panel yes, led to the idea of this panel. And then we are privileged and lucky enough to have with us Judy Lumumba e Anzi Koptel and Milena Años and Marina Lima, who were 4 of the artists involved in the creation of these 2 animations that we'll show today that were part of this endeavor. And we also have, I'm very happy that we have with us Paula Carlos from Bournemouth University, who was like the mind behind the structure and the crafting of the workshop that that brought into life these 2 animations. Unfortunately, there was another person that we would have loved to have with us today. That is Ngendo Muki, who is the director of these 2 animations. She's not with us, but I'm sure you will see how brilliant she is from the screening of the 2 animations. So the first part would be Andrea showing the animation and explaining a little bit about the project. The second part is a discussion, a chat with artists and academics to unpack how this kind of experiences can promote a dialogue in different countries of the south of the world. So, Andrea, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Isabella. I'm very happy to be here, even if virtually. Speaking from London, it's quite cold. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Andrea Medrado, a senior lecturer at the School of Media and Communication of the University of Westminster in London. Thank you so much for attending this session on Artivism to promote a South-to-South dialogue, as in a global South dialogue. What we are presenting here stems from the eVoices project, funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council, AHRC, in the UK. And I worked as the co-investigator in the project when I was based at the Federal Fluminense University in Rio, in Brazil. And Isabella Rega was the PI in the project. So the aim of the project was to analyze different uses of digital technologies by marginalized communities in the Global South, and we focus on Latin America, Brazil, and Africa, Kenya. We start this session by showing 2 short animations, as Isabella mentioned, that were made in workshops in both countries. The first animation, Portrait of Marielle, was produced by Kenyan artists in Nairobi to honor Marielle Franco, a Brazilian politician, city councillor for Rio de Janeiro, a human rights advocate, a Black lesbian woman who was born and raised in a favela in Rio. Marielle was murdered and her murder remains unsolved. The animation was directed by Paula Carlos and Ngendo Muki, as Isabella mentioned, and Paula is here today with us in the panel. And 2 artists who produced the animation, who worked on the animation, Judy Lumumba and Anzi Koptel, are also here with us. The second animation, Homage to Wangari Maathai, was produced with artists in my hometown of Salvador, Brazil, in Acervo da Laje, and also directed by Ngendo Muki, funded by the Goethe Institute. And 2 of the artists, Milena Anjos and Marina Lima, are also here with us today. So we are very, very grateful and very honored to have them all here today with us to have the discussion. But let's start by watching the 2 films, the 2 animations. So, play them now.
Yes, give us a second.
Sim.
Ina majonzi.
And we're screening animation, so also this is challenging.
Na machozi machoni. Wow. History ni sad yani, but same time tamu yani. Design nakumbusha nikukumbushe, ucheki yani. Look within you, juu utapata unachosaka. Juu mawingu ilifunga, na sai jua imechomoza. Design ina prove it's a new day. Tuko fan na see, my eyes are red juu ya machozi nilimwaga jana, but nina hope, so I can still see. Nataka ni spell hii jina, na si jina tu, ni hii jina iko na C katikati, yani FRANCO, but most importantly MARIELLE, yani nabonga kusu Franco Mariel. Tulimpoteza Mariel akipigania haki za kina mama, mawalala hoi, wanyonge na walionyongwa na serikali. Kweli hii serikali ina serikali za kuiba maisha za watu. Wow. Hii serikali ina serikali za kuiba maisha za watu. Long live in our hearts. R.I.P. F. Maria. R.I.P.
Mwanasiasa mtetezi wa haki ya kina dada na bado mzazi, alikuwa wakili wa watu maskini wanaoteswa na serikali katili. Wanatumia vikosi vya polisi kusimamishia watu maisha kwa risasi.
So that was like, I'm feeling while can you show the second one? So that was the output of a 4 days workshop we had in Kenya with Kenyan artists. The animation you saw, the music, Adzikopter was leading on the music creation, was all created in these 4 days. And this is using the same approach, what was produced by artists in Brazil.
Wangari. Seus olhos continuam vivos, espumando pelo mar da Bahia. O barco das memórias atravessou o oceano e fez da sua história a nossa história. Aprendemos a lidar com a terra, seguramos suas mãos negras, plantamos árvores e tudo tornou-se verde. Quênia, ressoa o nome Wangari, gritem revolução, mulher negra, desde o ventre da sua mãe. Wangari, seus olhos continuam vivos, espumando pelo mar da Bahia. O barco das memórias atravessou o oceano e fez da sua história a nossa história. É o andar de pés no chão que aprendi com minhas ancestrais. É o andar de pés no chão que aprendi com minhas ancestrais.
Back to me now.
Yes, you're back.
Okay. We are far from the sea. My eyes are red because of the tears I shed yesterday, but there's hope, so I can still see. In Kenya, these experiences of connection through the animation workshop led to a journey from being far from the sea, distant to each other, to clearing out our vision and seeing connection between two countries, connections between Africa and Latin America, between Brazil and Kenya, connections which are often fragmented by colonial legacies, seeing bridges between Kenya and Brazil, finding hope. Your eyes are alive, sea foams over the Bahian Sea. The boat of memories crossed the ocean and made your history our history. Waves of connection created by these experiences also in Brazil. They cleared our vision to the stories of Wangari and Marielle, Marina, Milena, Judy, and Azi, Kenyans and Brazilians, interconnected. In the plural global souths, in Latin America and Africa, in Kenya and Brazil, our stories cross each other all the time. Whether we realize it or not, connective experiences made possible by Artivism help us build new, healing, connective memories. As Global South peoples, we can learn about erased histories, but we can also recognize ourselves in our stories and histories and become stronger. These experiences of South-to-South connections, bridges and dialogues between media activists and artivists in the Global South are at the core of our new book, South-to-South Communication, that Isabella mentioned. And our key arguments revolve around the urgent need to engage in South-to-South dialogues to create more connections, sustainable connections between Global South communities. We suggest that this is an essential step towards identifying and facing global problems such as state repression, state violence, social inequality, and climate crisis. In the book, we also argue that analyzing the characteristics of South-to-South connections can offer contributions to the study of media education, social change, and movement building. Drawing from these experiences, such as the animation workshops, we developed this argument by focusing on instances when media narratives in countries of different global souths, in the plural, intertwine and transform each other. Our book has 7 chapters. We start by setting the scene, analyzing the media activist and artivist initiatives in Brazil and Kenya. What are they about? How do they involve their communities, and what do they have in common? Chapter 1 is a theoretical chapter dedicated to understanding marginalization in the Global South and establishing linkages between decolonial and intersectional perspectives. Chapter 2 is about favela media activism, and we ask, is there such a thing as a South-to-South media activism? And yes, that's what we answer, and we connect South-to-South media activism to 3 main axes: as mobilizer of collective memories and histories, as a creator of dialogical spaces, as we are going to discuss today, and as a reclaimer and creator of media territories. In chapter 3, we delve into this idea of South-to-South media activism and artivism, analyzing what we learned about artivism in Kenya. In the second half of the book, we start connecting the threads between the 2 countries even more strongly. Chapter 4 focuses on issues of social media visibility in Brazil and Kenya, and how they affect marginalized communities in social movements, for example, becoming more vulnerable. And we develop a model called the Stepping into Visibility model. Chapter 5 is about the experience of the animation. That is kind of the main focus of the session today. In chapter 6, to put it simply, is about the lessons that we learned along the way and along this journey. And what a journey. We started it in 2018. Pre-pandemic times, so much has happened in our lives, personal and professional, since then. We saw our children grow up. We saw the world stand still. We moved across the world. And at the same time, for me personally, this has been a journey south, back to my own hometown of Salvador, to my own roots. Growing up there, I would often use the word axé and know very little about its Yoruba roots. So this book is about learning to unlearn our erased histories and the role that media, arts, media activism, and artivism play in this. I feel honored to be here in this panel with 2 inspiring women from Salvador, Milena and Marina, with my friends Paula and Isabella, with 2 inspiring artists from Nairobi, Azi and Judy. The stories of inspiring people we met along the journey are very visible, present along the lines of what we wrote in the book, and we also wanted to make them visible here as we launch this book, pre-launch. So let's use this opportunity to engage in more South-to-South dialogues because one way to maintain the legacy of those who fight for social justice is to share their stories and to share them from the margins. Let us celebrate and honor the legacies of the Mariels and Wangaris, Milenas and Judys, Marinas and Aziz. Let's not erase the people who built their lives in the periphery shanty towns of Brazil, Kenya, and the world. Let us focus on art, share their knowledge, listen to the poems and lyrics, connective voices. These connections can be transformative and these transformations can be powerful. So that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you. So after this short introduction, now I would like to start our conversation. And I have a first question for Aziz and Milena. So Aziz, could you, both of you, could you reflect on the experience of working on this animation? Aziz, what did you learn specifically about Brazil and about Marielle Franco? How did working on this project change your perception of Brazil and its people and the challenges they are facing? How did this work help you connect with their realities, if it did? And the same for Milena. Milena, what did you learn?
This is the story
About Kenya and about Wangari Maathai. How did working in this project change your perception about Kenya, its people, and their challenges? And how do you think that this help you connect, this project help you to connect with their reality? So the floor, Aziz, is yours.
Thank you, Isabella. Just maybe to introduce myself, I go by the name Ezi Cocktail. I'm an artist, I'm an activist, I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm also a social activist based in Nairobi, Kenya. So I want to take this opportunity to greet each one of you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Just to jump into the question right away, what I will want to share about my experience while we were working on the animation from Marielle Franco. So one thing that stood out for me was Marielle was an activist. And so for me, being a Kenyan-based activist, there are so many things that we undergo while protecting people's rights. For example, we all know that Marielle Franco was a government employee that was working under the municipal council. And contrary to that, she was also an activist who spoke issues around women and generally about human rights. And this also comes with baggage of threats and issues around extrajudicial killings, because most of the politicians or most of the status quo, they don't, perhaps they don't like people speak about issues that affect people directly. And so they try to use power to manipulate individuals who try to talk about issues. So for me, I relate with the struggle, because there are a number of things that have also happened to me personally while participating or trying to fight for people's rights, and also trying to mobilize masses, educate people on their rights and issues concerning their communities. And so for me, the struggle was real. But again, also trying to bring an interlude between activism and artivism, or perhaps music, was another element that for me, I never saw I never saw it coming. So we were trying to bring the different aspects of art and giving it life, because Marielle was not an artist per se, but the image that goes around, people would easily connect with it when we use art and activism. So for me, I think it was one of the best tools to also talk about issues that surround the people within the globe. So for me, I really connect with the issues that Brazil in general, and also the world, that we face as humanity, and as people who fight for rights. Yes, thanks.
Thank you, Azi. Milena.
Olá, eu agradeço o espaço de estar aqui apresentando a minha experiência no projeto lá de 2018, que foi a construção.
Okay, I thank you very much for this space, for being here, because I construct about Onanari. I work with communication. I live in Salvador. Before speaking of my experience in working experience, I would like to give some context. So our relationship with Africa. Speaking of Brazil, we actually don't learn very much about Africa in Brazil.
Muito pouco
I'm talking about
histórico sobre o processo cultural
actually, high
do continente
school.
africano.
We actually don't learn very much about the processes, the cultural processes, the history about Africa. We don't learn very much, specifically on high school. Actually, we learn about slavery. That's what we learn. So we are raised, we are brought up on the slavery, about slavery in Africa. That's what they taught to us at school. So when we construct the animation, it's to break the stereotype, actually. It's to break the stereotypes that we have. In 2018, I met Wangari when I did the workshop. I work with audiovisual, and when I learned about taking part on a workshop by a Kenyan activist, I would understand a little bit more about the cinema in Kenya. This was my first drive. I was driven by that to understand a little bit more about Kenyan cinema. And over there, constructing the animation, building the animation, making the animation, we learn who we were working. That's when I actually met Wangari, which is avant-garde woman. I didn't know her before, which is amazing because it's a woman, an African woman who got the Nobel Prize, and we didn't know her. So it was really surprising, which actually reinforced what I said at the beginning. We actually do not exchange very much. We don't have much exchange between Brazil and Africa. So it was amazing to get to know Wangari. Since 1970, she has been discussing the subject, which now is a global subject, which is the environment, which reinforces specifically about Black women in Africa, in Brazil. We are ahead of our time. We are talking about humanity, not only about Wangari actually talks about Kenya, but also about humanity. So we must get this stronger. We must make this thought a bit stronger. We are ahead of our time. We are trying to improve the humanity. I actually learned a lot. I grew up. I matured during the process. I noticed myself, my roots, actually. I learned about my roots, and I learned how my roots are powerful, and what we learn and what we don't learn, actually, at the university and at school. I studied journalism in a federal university in Brazil, and we actually did not study African literature as we should. So we must search for that individually. We must search for that by ourselves. I learned about Wangari. I learned about the cinema by myself. So from this search, I get stronger. I know people like Marielle, like Wangari. So I am more mature as an activist and as a human being.
Thank you very much, Milena. Yes, you can. The next question is for Marina and Judy. So during the Voices, we work a lot with the expression Artivists, which combines together activism and arts. And how do you see yourself in this equation between activism and artivism? Do you think about yourself as an artist? And if so, do you think about yourself as an artivist? And if so, how do you think your work is a form of activism?
Good morning, good afternoon, good
Olá,
evening.
bom
I'm so
dia,
humbled
boa
to be
tarde,
here.
boa noite.
My name is
Né?
Judy
Gostaria
Lumumba
de,
from
primeiramente,
Nairobi, Kenya.
agradecer o
I work-
convite.
Just a second, sorry, Judy. So yes, Judy, I should have said it, sorry. Judy, if you can start. And Monica, if you can go back to the Portuguese channel, if not, we hear you. Thank you. Let's try again. Judy, sorry. Can you start again?
It's okay. I'm humbled to be here and sitting in this panel today. My name is Judy Lumumba from Nairobi, Kenya. I work primarily as an artist, and I work closely with faith-based organizations, social justice centers, community-based organizations to promote human rights and social justice and social accountability among communities. And how do I see myself in a equation between activism and artivism? I would like to start by saying that there's a growing interest in the area of creative and art-based approaches as a form of activism within the social engagement and our societies. Art was just considered as a skill back then, as a form of entertainment, but not something that people or the world view as a form of activism, or viewed it as a way, as a mode that we could use in the area of activism. I would say that the art of expression against injustices is another mode or a structure of activism. So they relate. Artivism and activism, they work hand in hand, because I believe artists knows best to express themselves, maybe using poetry, using painting, using music as a way to promote change, or to bring change to their communities. And also I would add, I'm seeing myself in the equation as an artist, because activism and activists, they cut across, and I've said they work closely together for change. Just like activism is another form or medium of expression against injustices. And arts for a long time, and it continue as a vehicle to create understanding and awareness about different issues around our communities and society. So yes, I do think myself as an artist, and what I think about my work as a form of activism is through my work as an artist, I realized that in order to convey everyday experiences, art provides a way to sidestep and view injustices and view community in a different way, in a different expression. Previously, we knew activism as a way of protesting, going to the street, and all that. But when we participated in the workshop to create the Marielle Franco animation, it art really stood out. When you look at the animation, you realize that there was poetry, there was strokes of brushes, there was some music, there was some sound. All those were combined to bring out the animation and to put justice at its core. Another thing I'll say is working as an artist as a form of artivism. It provides opportunity to be different kind of activist. And the last thing I will say is I believe also art can bring people together to promote social cohesion. So the art or artivism open up alternative spaces for voices to be surfaced. And one thing I like about artivism is because even the deaf can be able to understand it. Even the blind can be able to understand it. Even everyone is inclusive. I would say artivism is inclusive at another level. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. Marina.
Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. So I would like to thank you very much for the invitation. My name is Marina Lima. I am a mother, I am an artist, I am a poet. I live in the community of in Salvador, Bahia, and yes, I am an artist. First of all, I am a Black woman inside a space that is marginalized, which is the periphery of Brazil. And I was introduced in art when I was 16 years old. I was in high school, and I it was a huge impact. I am a poet. It was a huge impact for me, and I consider myself an activist, an artist, because I can bring through my poems things that are important to rethink. So I talk about the genocide of Black people in Brazil. So I bring that in my poems to talk about actually the violence brought by the state in Brazil. So I talk on my poems and also where we live in. I was introduced to art when I was 16 years old, and art saved myself. And so I can go through other space and bring all the thematics and topics that I would like to discuss. I like to talk about Conceição Evaristo, who is a writer, is a Brazilian writer, and she talks about escrevivência, which is writing about yourself. And when she talks about writing about yourself, she doesn't talk actually about writing about herself, but writing about the collective. She wants to wake up everyone. And I bring in my poems not only to wake people up and also impact people. I'm also an art educator. I give poems workshop. I'm also graduated in video. Therefore, I am on the collective. We develop lots of workshops on our communities here in Salvador. And I believe that education impacts too much. So nowadays, actually, I study social science in Unilag, which is a university here that integrates Afro-Brazilian studies. And I am super grateful to the university. I had actually a better experience learning the continent through the university because the university talks about Africa and Portuguese English, talks about Angola, So we learn about Africa. I started learning about Africa, having another look to Africa, working on my poems and denouncing, also talking about this writing that is a collective writing. I cannot exist as a Black woman by a solo mother, raised by a solo mother. I cannot exist without art, without my poems. So my existence is that not only talk about me, but talking about the collective, talking about Black women in Brazil, talking about art in Brazil. So that's it.
Thank you very much, Marina. Thank you. So our next question is for Paula Kallus. Researching art as research and doing research with art. This animation and the process of their creation is an example of how arts practices can be embedded in research from a methodological point of view. Can you elaborate a bit on this and on the benefits of using animation in this kind of project?
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm going to try to elaborate on this.
A little bit.
A little bit. Okay. So just to get stuck in straight away, more often than not, I think when we talk about art and research, we tend to think about art in the service of research. So kind of art being used to disseminate, for example, research findings, as opposed to thinking about art as offering data in itself or being a methodology that can combine with other disciplines. So like when myself and Isabella and Andrea were talking about this, we sort of framed this question or thinking about the question around art and research or research through art. And that idea isn't necessarily my idea. It comes from Christopher Frayling, who in the 1990s was at the RCA and was trying to delineate the difference between research into art and design, research through art and design, and research for art and design. And these differences kind of move from, researching an aesthetic or a history of art to communicating research through practice of making. So for me, this idea of making is really important, because often it's an aspect that researchers in the arts are considering, and they look at it as offering methodological potential. But of course, it's really hard to delineate because often this is experiential and subjective. But I like the idea of subjectivity and that it offers subjective knowledge. And I think that's really important when you're thinking about voice, for example. So to kind of follow on from this idea of making, there's an anthropologist called Tim Ingold who's got a book about making. And at the beginning of the book, he talks about this relationship between thinking and making. And he states that if you had to ask a theorist or a craftsman about thinking and making, they might give you different answers. One would say they make through thinking, and the other might say that they think through making. And I really like this idea of sort of thinking through making. So when I wanted to sort of think about the benefits of including artistic practice as a method for qualitative research, for example, I wanted to frame the discussion by thinking about the relationships, for example, of material or process, actions, experiments, all of these things that are connected to artistic practice. And, we tend to very often just stop at the art object and see the art object as an expression of ideas, but we give less attention to the production of that object and thinking about the production of that object as offering potential. And that's something that myself and Andrea and Isabella had spoken about even at the very beginning of this project, when we came to thinking about animation and what the benefits of the practice of animation offered methodologically. So with this project, the process and practice of animation obviously gives specific potential that I wanted to kind of elaborate on, mainly because animation is really unique as a medium in that it has this ability to draw from a whole range of different practices. It's my favorite thing to say about animation. Every time I write about animation or talk about animation, I always talk about how it has this really unique ability to bring artists from a range of different practices, whether that's drawing or painting, photography, film, sound, or even sculpture. And you can draw from those practices and combine them in new ways to make animation. And so even when you're talking or thinking about animation, you as an artist, as a maker, you can bring your knowledge, your expertise, your skills into that process. And that's something we wanted to consider when we were designing the animation workshops, where we wanted to see how we could be encompass, if you like, all of these different practices by working with participants that might not have experience with animation, but that are artists in their own right and would have the ability to deploy their own skills within animation. And of course, these intersections from these different practices mean that you're able to work with artists from these different backgrounds. Like we had graffiti artists who we were working with. There were poets, photographers, painters, and musicians. And the combination of this in the workshop setup, I think, was really interesting. So together with Ngendo Muki, who is a Kenyan artist and animator, also a graduate from the RCA, and has made loads of award-winning animations in her own right. We designed a series of workshops where we knew that we were working within a very limited time frame. And we also wanted to ensure that we were using materials that didn't require specialist software or access to specialist technologies. We wanted to make something that was accessible and that participants could take away with them and continue to make should they want to do so. So I'll talk a little bit about the process of the making and how we went about thinking about that. So as you guys already know, we went about to look at making a portrait of Marielle Franco. And Andrea gave, at the start of the workshop, gave us this contextual account of who Marielle was, her life, her activism. And this contextualization was really important because, of course, as we've heard from Judy, for example, that there were resonances, if you like, that were had between the participants and these stories that were being told. And everybody felt, I think, much more invested in the process. So when we came to looking at making this portrait, because I like to think of it as a portrait of Marielle, we wanted to bring not only the image of Marielle and who she was, but also the impact she had. So we used footage from the marches that were happening across the world following the death of Marielle. And then we took the frames from this news footage and some frames of clips of Marielle, and we printed it out individually on pieces of paper. So for those of you who just a really simple principle of animation, which is 24 separate images in succession is 1 second on screen. Right? So we printed out these successive images. And what that meant was, even if you weren't a fine artist, even if you weren't a great illustrator, even if you weren't a great painter, you had a basis upon which to work. And so we took these printouts of these images from the footage, and then we invited the artists to interject upon these images in different ways using different media. At the beginning, we gave the people in the workshop only a couple of frames to work with. And then we combined every individual's couple of frames together to create a few seconds of animation that we could view at the end of the day. And as we were doing so, we were talking about deciding, for example, which mediums we were using, that we could scratch the image away, or we could tear that image or paint on top of it? And what did those choices mean? Like if you were choosing to use one medium or another, and if you were writing or using text on top of the image, what do these juxtapositions kind of bring about in terms of new meaning and new ideas? So that was kind of like a material engagement, I guess, with animation. But also one thing which I found particularly interesting and actually ties in to what was mentioned earlier, which is this idea of the collective, are the codependency that emerges in animation and in the process of animation. So when you make an animation, it's very hard to do that on your own. Usually animations are made with huge teams of people, and artists tend to kind of pass, if you like, the baton on as they're producing more and more frames. And that's very much how we work. So we sat around a table, everyone was sitting around this round table. Every artist was making a batch of frames, but they needed to know that what they were making related somehow to what was coming before and after what they made. So there was this recognition that the animation that was produced was really the result of a collective effort rather than an individual one. And that's a shift in, like, you know, the artist as being an individual voice versus the collective voice, which I think is echoed in what some of the participants have been talking about, and the artists and activists have been talking about today. I think I'll leave it there. I don't know if I've said enough, but I know that we had an opportunity for questions and answers, so I'm happy to kind of talk a little bit more about that later on.
Thank you, Paula. Yes, we can have a Paula. So we're running out of time. There is a question I want to ask especially starting with Milena and Marina, if you want to say something, but it's a question to everyone in the panel. So according to your experience as an artist, an activist, and a scholar, how can this kind of initiative contribute to a South-to-South dialogue between activists and artists on issues of social justice and social equality? So to wrap up this session. Yes. And I need an answer in 1 minute. Yeah. No, but it's important to bring it back to the title or theme of the panel. So I'm just saying because our interpreter will have to go very soon. So we'll start with Milena and Marina. If you want to say something.
Milena, se puder.
Eu acho que a importância desses...
I think it's important, this space, is to make the history visual. So I actually learned about Wagari because of this workshop, because of this process, because we constructed the animation. So before all, we are able to make it visual and also make people curious about that. So workshop actually is designed to bond us and create curiosity and make us to move ahead and look for other stories and go ahead. So I agree with Milena. I think we are more visual now. We have visibility at the moment because after the workshop, at the right day of the workshop, I was approved at the university. And after that, I had a class, and I actually met her through the workshop. So as Milena said, we don't learn very much at school. So we create a bond, we bond with people, and we also awake to get to know more, to learn more And so I'm super grateful to the workshop, to get to know other people, to really be interested in the narrative, in the collective, in the histories, in people, and also aggregate the people from my community because they are important and they have their own voice. They also contribute a lot with our community. So make this dialogue between the academy and the community, it's great. And we are giving back. I think the community is giving back. Sorry. So the community has to participate and has a lot to say and a lot to contribute to for everyone. That's it.
Thank you. Milena, nod if you want, like, do you want to add something or not?
No.
No, it's okay. It's all right.
Thank you. So I asked the same question to Azi and Judy. Do you want to say something about this?
Yeah. Our struggles are connected with the different because I mean we pass through different targets when we struggle to fight for people's rights. So for me, I've come to realize that most of the things that we do are distrust and anxiety. And so for this reason, we need to train people. We need to come together and work as a team because the movement is not for individuals, but for teams. So we need to work as a team, as a collective, so that we may end this the struggle. And again, we also need to educate people, because by educating masses, it means that people are informed and they know different strategies of how to deal with issues concerning them. And also, again, liberating people, because most of the people are still in cocoons. They are trying to do things within their traditions and stuff. So we need also to come again together and try to liberate people. So our message is always to educate, to liberate, and more so to push agendas that strive towards ending misuse of human rights, and again, using also art as a tool for social change. Thank you for having me. I've been Ezi Cocktail. Thank you.
Thank you. We don't have much time left, so I think I will close it here. But if there is one question that you want to ask, just to open up really briefly the Q&A session. If there is one question you want to ask, I think we can accommodate one question. To anyone? Nope. Okay. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Milena. Thank you, Marina. Thank you, Azi. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Monica, for translating. It was really an honor to have you all here and share your experience, your passion, and your work. And I hope we will have other occasions to, keep the dialogue going. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, obrigada.
Obrigada, Mônica. Obrigada, querida. Tchau. Obrigada.
Bye.
Ah.
Igualmente, obrigada.